Brown knew there was no more firm and potent believer in spooks and goblins than Ichabod Crane.
Just gather round and I'll elucidate on what goes on outside when it gets late. Long about midnight, the ghosts and banshees, they get together for their nightly jamboree. There's things with horns and saucer eyes, some with fangs about this size.
Some are fat and some are thin.
And some don't even wear their skin.
Oh, I'm telling you, brother, it's a frightful sight to see what goes on Halloween night.
Is imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Welcome back to the Black Cat's Shadow, where we talk about folklore, urban legends, and true crime, and some weird things that happen around the world, and how it inspires some of our favorite horror movies. And I'm your co-host, Andy, podcasting from Kansas City, Missouri. And my co-host is Dakota. How's it going tonight, Dakota?
Oh, it's going great. I got a lot of stuff done today. I'm pretty excited about Sleepy Hollow. One of my favorite legends, one of my favorite movies too.
Yeah, and as Dakota said, we're going to dive into the legend of Sleepy Hollow tonight, and we're going to talk about, along with that, the folklore behind it. We're also going to talk about the movie Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp from 1999. And as always, you can find us on social media. You can find us on Facebook. You can go on there, give us a like. We're on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @BlackCatPodcast. And I usually post some horror headlines on there. And then we're also on Horror Amino, and you can just do a search and look for Black Cat Shadow. We're on there. And if you'd like to send us an email, ask a question, give us a topic idea, go ahead and send us an email at blackcatpodcast@gmail.com. And, because we always look forward to hearing from our listeners. And also, some of the outlets that you can find us on is on iTunes and Stitcher. And one way to definitely help out the podcast is to leave us a review on iTunes. And it just helps us out a little bit. It just takes a few minutes of your time. So we want to take a look at what DVDs are coming out for this month. And Dakota, I think you've been taking a look at that. What did you find out for what DVDs are coming out for this month?
Well, as far as horror goes, the big one that's coming out, the mainstream movie, is actually Don't Breathe. I think it did pretty good in the box office. It stayed in theaters for a month and a half. But it does come out this month on the 29th. So looking for a good movie to buy for a stocking stuffer for Christmas, definitely get Don't Breathe. I know I'm getting it. It's probably going to be a great movie. Other than that, I'm not seeing anything for November, but December looks good, and we'll cover December at the beginning of the month.
All right, yeah, I'm really curious to see Don't Breathe. The trailer looked really good. I just did not get out to the theater to see it, so I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out. So it looks like it's right up my alley. So Dakota, when I mention the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman riding down the trail in upstate New York. I mean, that's the most I've ever seen it. I remember the original, the little Disney cartoon they made about it. And then, I did my own research when I was in school, and I wrote papers on it. It became one of my favorite legends just because it was unnatural. And the unnatural has kind of sparked an interest in me.
Yeah, I mean, most people think of the Headless Horseman when, when you talk about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's just an image that has been popularized by different, by Disney, by different movies. I think there's a lot of horror movies that actually have the Headless Horseman as a villain. So, and especially, you see that those shows pop up during the Halloween season, which we just got through, and we're kind of, coming down off our Halloween high and trying to pick ourselves up, but we're getting through it. But, another one of the, when I think of like some TV shows and things like that, one of my favorite TV shows is an old TV show from like the 70s, and it's called Kolchak the Night Stalker. And there's one episode where it kind of has a unique spin on the horseman image or the character with a ghostly biker, but he doesn't have a head. So he's a headless biker, and he uses a samurai sword, and he uses that to behead, seemingly innocent bystanders. And so it was pretty entertaining. I love that old show, and there is a new TV show called Sleepy Hollow that I'm sure features the Headless Horseman. I have not watched that yet, though. Have you watched that, Dakota?
Oh yeah, it's great. Not to ruin it for anybody, but it does kind of take a step back from the original story. Kind of looks at it from a different perspective. That Ichabod Crane was more than he seemed. He wasn't just a nobody or a rider in some instances, or a constable in other instances. He was more than that, and the Headless Horseman was more than that too. And it kind of came full circle for me after the first season. It kind of went a little haywire, but it's a great show for people that are into that kind of stuff. I mean, for people that like Supernatural, the TV show, and then getting into stuff like that too. I mean, they'll kind of go gaga over that, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely was really into Supernatural. I watched the first few seasons. I need to get back into it. But yeah, I would probably like Sleepy Hollow. I need to check that out. So, thinking about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, it's like, what is the Legend of Sleepy Hollow? Sleepy Hollow isn't actually like a place, and where is it, and what does it have to do with the Headless Horseman? And who was the Headless Horseman? Was there a person that became the Headless Horseman? What was the inspiration behind the story? And so, the author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is Washington Irving, and he was an American author, and he actually lived in Europe for some time, and he heard legends of headless ghosts riding horses, various European folk tales, and oftentimes they were seen as bad omens, I think, and often targeting arrogant, scheming people. And and Dakota, are you familiar with any of the folklore regarding the Headless Horseman?
Yeah, definitely. The American side of it's pretty cut and dry. We know that story. And then what we do is we kind of get into the more European side of it, like the Celtic and the German lore. The Celtics believe that it was they called him the Dark Man. He was just a headless horse rider who basically what we have is he's seeking out his lost head. But in the Celtic origins, instead of carrying a sword, an axe, he had a whip, and he used the whip to do it. And what was made it even more kind of macabre was that the whip was made out of a horse's spine.
And one of the stories that I ran across, so there's kind of variations on that, what he has. Like on one story that I read, they said that the whip was made from a dead man's spine. That's kind of creepy too.
Yeah, I think that was the German one, actually.
The
one that the Brothers Grimm kind of came up with. Because the Brothers Grimm heard this story, and everybody knows the Brothers Grimm. They've written a lot of our popular fairy tales. But they actually wrote a kind of legend about a headless horseman that would kill people out of spite or out of out of revenge, kind of like a slasher would. I mean, other than that, the legend as it transfers to the United States was a little bit different between the ones in Europe and there's even an Indian, not like Native American, but like India folklore of a headless horseman that would steal souls.
It's interesting how rather than be physically violent, it would take your soul, I guess, and And I wonder if that has something to do with more of like the Eastern philosophy tied into it, where there's more spiritual ramifications for actions or stories, folklore that they have. It's kind of interesting to see the differences.
Yeah, a lot with the Indian folklore is more it was a person born out of spite and born out of like a wrongful, like somebody who's born and they're treated wrong, or born out of violence and wrongful death. In part of the Indian myth, the creature or being without a head, if you throw in this indigo dye on them, indigo is a color that's supposedly spiritual in India, and it's cleansing, kind of like the Christians believe red and white are two very important colors in their religion. We kind of get into this region. Indigo, like violet and purple, are very important colors. So we see, like how blood is associated with horror, right?
Right.
So we transfer over to these colors, kind of being related to these myths, these stories.
The symbolism in folklore is really interesting, and how it corresponds to like other things and other, it's supposed to kind of teach us about life. But yeah, those European folktales are really strange, and it's interesting to see how they influenced Washington Irving to write his story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And talking about Sleepy Hollow, I was looking that up, and Sleepy Hollow, the name, refers to a Dutch settlement in New York in the 1790s, and it was rumored to have quite the collection of ghosts, especially populated thanks to the Revolutionary War. And one of the more popular ghosts is the Headless Horseman. And so I guess the story behind the Headless Horseman was he was supposedly a Hessian soldier killed in the Battle of the White Plains. I guess a cannonball severed his head. He was then buried in the graveyard of an old Dutch church in Sleepy Hollow. And he just happened to die on Halloween Day in 1776. So legend has it that he appears to travelers in the area and chases them to take their head, because he's kind of looking for his own head. And to this day you can still visit the old Dutch church and the infamous bridge in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And even and looking at some other weird like occurrences that are related to like ghosts or sightings of headless like apparitions. Or I was looking up some stories and some reports, and even on the other side of the country in California, and the mountains of the Santa Lucia Range, there's a mission of San Antonio de Padua, and that's a home to a ghost that appears as a headless woman on horseback. And then just south of there in Oakland, California, there's a story that on the Bay Bridge, drivers have reported seeing a headless man knocking on their window of their car as they travel over the bridge. So it's kind of interesting, the folklore that tells stories of headless ghosts, but you see people that have reported, seeing strange things like that too. Dakota, have you ever read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow?
I never read the book. I've never actually got my hands on a copy that I actually like. Everyone I talk to says like the more modern printed copies are kind of diluted down a little bit, and they're kind of dry as far as writing goes. I mean, I don't understand why they would be, unless they're like translated by another person or written by another person. But I really do want to read it. Do you know any place I could find one, like an original copy?
I don't know about that. I mean, of course, you can get like a reprinted one, I'm sure pretty easily. I think it was originally released as like a collection of short stories. It was like that story and then another short story of his called Rip Van Winkle, of course, that everybody knows about. I think they were both in the same collection of short stories. So, I mean, I'm sure that if you do some digging, you could probably find it somewhere. Now, whether or not it's been, I don't know what the word is, but like rewritten or edited or whatever, that's a different story. I remember like, when I was a young kid in school, like they'd always show us the TV movie with Jeff Goldblum, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And that one was pretty scary actually. And of course, I was a kid when I saw it, and I have not seen it since, but that one might be kind of fun to track down. But basically, the story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, is a pretty interesting story. It was first published in 1820, and it's about a school teacher named Ichabod Crane, and he moves to a village called Sleepy Hollow, and he meets Katrina Van Tassel, and he just falls head over heels in love with her, and he wants to marry her. And so, and also the other main reason for this love interest is because Katrina is the daughter of a wealthy farmer named Baltus Van Tassel. And winning her hand is not going to come easy, because he does have a rival in the form of a local man named Brom Bones. He's kind of a rough local man, and as the story goes along, Ichabod Crane attends a harvest party at the Van Tassel's house, and that's when Ichabod first hears the tale of the Headless Horseman, and actually it's Brom Bones is the one telling the story. And you find out that Brom is actually quite the prankster as well. And so after the party, and actually Ichabod fails to win over Katrina, so he's kind of downtrodden, just kind of depressed, and so he goes and rides towards home, and late at night, and as he's passing through the woods to Sleepy Hollow, he sees a rider on a horse approach. But as the rider gets closer, Ichabod notices he doesn't have a head. So of course Ichabod's freaked out, and he just takes off as fast as he can, and because he remembers a part of the story that Brom told, where that the horseman cannot cross the bridge by the old Dutch church. So he takes off, and in fear of his life, he wants to make it to the bridge. So he does make it across the bridge, and he feels safer once he's across the bridge, and he stops to take a look behind him to see if the horseman is still chasing after him. The horseman stopped just on the other side of the bridge. The horseman takes what appears to be a head and throws it at Ichabod Crane, and that's kind of where the story ends. Like, well, it's not where it ends, but it's where it ends from his perspective, because the next morning, the townspeople will discover that he's missing. They don't know where he's at. He's nowhere to be found. They do find his horse wandering nearby, and they find his hat in the woods, and next to his hat is the shattered remains of a pumpkin. And so, the story goes, kind of the old wives' tale was that the malevolent spirit of the horseman carried him off. But there is an interesting side note that could be revealing too. It was well known that Brom Bones was a skilled stunt horse rider, and like I said, he was a prankster. And so the pumpkin found at the scene, of the disappearance, it could possibly be the same. It's kind of the same size of a head, and that in the dark, in the dead of night, that very easily could be mistaken for a head. So who's to say that old Ichabod Crane just didn't get scared off and become a lawyer in Philadelphia? So it's a pretty interesting story. Like I said, they've made several movies off of it. Disney made an animated movie, and then there was a made-for-TV movie, and then in 1999, Tim Burton directed a movie called Sleepy Hollow.
Constable Ichabod Crane, sent from New York to investigate murder in Sleepy Hollow.
How much have your superiors explained to you?
Only that the three were slain in open ground, their heads severed from their bodies.
Taken by the Headless Horseman, taken back to hell. He rode a giant black steed. To look at him made your blood run cold. Even today, the Western Woods is a haunted place where brave men will not venture.
We have murders in New York without benefit of ghouls and goblins.
You're a long way from New York, Constable.
So, Sleepy Hollow was released in 1999, and it's directed by Tim Burton, and it stars Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. As you know, that both of those are pretty well-known actors and actresses. Johnny Depp, he's been in Edward Scissorhands and Sweeney Todd, and tons of movies. And then, of course, Christina Ricci's she was in the Addams Family. She was Wednesday in the Addams Family. And she's also in that werewolf movie called Cursed by Wes Craven. She's been in lots of things. And there was quite a few familiar actors in this one. So basically, this movie, it is about Ichabod Crane, and it does follow the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It follows the written story to a degree. I mean, there are some differences. Like in the movie, Johnny Depp is playing Ichabod Crane, and he's actually a constable, or like a detective, and he is sent to, he's kind of unusual in his time because he is relying more on science to solve crimes, and he's really fighting against the establishment, against the authority of that time, because they haven't quite turned towards science yet. They're still kind of holding on to some superstitions, trying to do things the way that they've always been done, holding to tradition. And so they really don't know what to think of Ichabod Crane. He's just a strange character. And so they decide to send him to a little village called Sleepy Hollow, where they've had some murders. So he travels to the village of Sleepy Hollow, and he discovers that there's a line in the movie where he says that he said we have plenty of murders in New York that aren't the result of ghosts and goblins, or things like something like that. And I think it's Baltus Van Tassel in the movie says, "But you're a long way from New York," or "This isn't New York," or something like that. So that's kind of like the theme. He's coming into this village with science and rational thinking, but then what he finds is that there's some things that he can't explain, some things that are very frightening that are going on in this village, and so it sets up a good mystery, and actually it's a pretty cool movie. There's it's actually set up like a slasher movie, really. There's a lot of kills, and so I was really impressed with this movie. Dakota, I think you said you've actually owned this movie, right?
Yeah, I own it. It's actually one of my favorite movies, just because I'm a big fan of Johnny Depp, obviously. But I kind of like the way they portrayed it. They portrayed it more of a deeper story, going more in depth about the Headless Horseman and his more of his origins, instead of I'm not trying to ruin the movie for anybody, but the fact that when he was killed, it wasn't because he got his head taken off by a cannonball. He got his own head chopped off by his own weapon.
Yeah, it was interesting that they did build up a really good backstory to him. So it was interesting, and it plays into the plot as it goes on, and you find out how the Headless Horseman is actually involved with the townspeople. I think that this movie is a great movie to watch during the Halloween season. I think that Tim Burton, he just captures the Halloween atmosphere perfectly in this movie, with the cinematography, and just the production design was really good. I thought some great set pieces and costumes, and the music was really good too. Of course, it's done by Danny Elfman, which is a famous composer. He's done lots of other movies. This movie kept a very, very fast pace. There was not a whole lot of downtime in this movie, which I liked a lot. There was a lot of kills, a lot of action. And I thought that the horseman himself really looked scary. And it's revealed early on that the character of the Headless Horseman is played by Christopher Walken, and his makeup is really cool in this movie. His teeth are filed down, and he has contacts in it. It just looks really, really scary, really cool. But like I said, the mythology behind the movie is a little bit different, because he is actually killing people in the movie, and they have to find out why he's killing people. So they kind of build onto the original mythology, but I don't think it really took away from the original legend. I thought they did a good job with the story. What were some of the things that you liked about this movie, Dakota?
Well, being a makeup enthusiast, obviously the makeup killed me, because I was like, Christopher Walken alone, he has this crazy attitude, and he couldn't pull it off, especially the filed down teeth. That's excellent. That's excellent work for the makeup artist. I don't know who it was, but they were awesome. Another thing I really liked is kind of adding in the effect of somebody of these people that are being hunted. It kind of, like you said, it kind of feels like a slasher movie a little bit. So I think that kind of gave me a little bit of plus in my book. Plus Johnny Depp, being the versatile actor he is. I mean, he can play like obviously a pirate, Pirates of the Caribbean, all the way down to this character who's supposed to be like in the book, like in the original story, he's supposed to be a passive person. But they kind of gave him a little bit more balls in this. Kind of made him seem a lot bigger than he was.
Yeah, and they gave him a really interesting backstory too. Like they gave him more character development, and I thought that was really interesting. With the backstory with his mom, and it explains why he kind of has turned his back on superstition and religion. And I won't get into it, but so it's there's a reason why he is the way he is, and they do explain that, and I like that aspect of the movie. They go into depth in his character, and I like that. The other movies that we've seen leading up to this point, Ichabod Crane has been a school teacher. He has been kind of a superstitious character, and so I think that's interesting that there's a turn here in this movie where he's turned his back on superstition. I'm not a huge Tim Burton fan. I don't know, it's just for me, I'm not a big fan of his movies, but this one I feel like is like, I don't know, it's different. It's more of he's done some other kind of spooky movies, Halloween type movies, but this is more like a straight up horror movie, I think, and I really enjoy it, for that. Dakota, was there anything that you didn't like about Sleepy Hollow?
Some of the character dynamics, like Christina Ricci's character, she was almost too forced. Very much a mediocre acting job, because her character, I think her character could have been pulled off a little better. I mean, a little less like stiff, a little less proper. I mean, she was using witchcraft, supposedly. I mean, using the protective sigils, obviously. She should have been a little bit more of a harder character. Like, so instead of being so like sophisticated, probably a little bit more rough around the edges, possibly. But that's my opinion. I can't really say anything on that. But some of the environments seemed a little too dreary. I think Tim Burton, when he kind of came up with the idea for the environment, was that with the Headless Horseman, with him being around, it added a sense of dread and a little sense of terror. So then, the morning after towards the end of the movie, they're leaving Sleepy Hollow. Everything's brighter. Everything's beautiful again. I think, in my opinion, it was a little underplayed. Like if they're gonna change the environment, make it look a little less dreary and a little more realistic.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, and I didn't catch that until you said that. But yeah, at the end, it's everything kind of becomes sunny, and they're hopeful, and yeah, throughout the whole movie, there's this feeling of oppression, and it's always overcast every day. It's just cloudy and gloomy, and it's an interesting film, that's for sure. So would you say to people that are wondering, would you tell them to go check this movie out?
Yeah, if I was to rate it from 1 to 10, I'd definitely rate it a 7. It's definitely a movie worth checking out. You can actually rent it at pretty much anywhere that has like a movie store anymore. I mean, not a lot of places do, but you can rent it there or even look it up on the internet. I'm sure. I mean, you even said it was on Netflix, so.
Yeah, currently it is streaming on Netflix. That's how I watched it. So if you got a Netflix subscription, that's an easy way to watch it. For me, it's hard. For me, it's a challenge for me to find any faults in this movie. I really enjoyed it. Like I'd seen it like once a long time ago, and so I was surprised. Like I'm surprised that I don't own this one. I don't have a physical copy of this movie because I really like this movie. It just really resonated with me, and so I was really happy to get the opportunity to rewatch it now because it's up there in my book. I mean, it's I'm sure it's probably not a perfect movie, but if I rate it, I would probably rate it like a 9 out of 10. And that's something that I'm not saying something for me because I'm not a big Tim Burton fan, but I would definitely say people should check this out, especially right now. Even though it's after Halloween, it's still like fall time, and this is like a perfect fall movie. It just it has kind of that gloomy setting, that gloomy Halloween setting. So if you're not one to let go of Halloween too soon, then this is a perfect movie to keep you in that mood.
Some of the actors that are in this movie obviously are some of the biggest name actors in like Europe, some of them in the United States. Specifically, obviously, Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci are two of the biggest actors in the movie. But going down the list, we got Michael Gambon, who was obviously Dumbledore in the last few Harry Potter movies. Jeffrey Jones. Yeah, so you had Jeffrey Jones. For people who don't know, he was the father in Beetlejuice. Then Richard Griffiths, the one he recently passed away. He was actually Uncle Vernon in Harry Potter.
Oh yeah, okay.
Ian McDiarmid, for the Star Wars fans out there, Emperor Palpatine. Only thing I really know him from. Big fan of his work for that movie series, though. Then obviously Christopher Walken, some of the biggest name actors in this movie. It's a great cast. I think they really brought together a good group of people because they all have the same kind of acting style. They all get into their characters. Michael Gambon, though, his performance in that movie really, really changed my outlook on him because I've only ever seen him as Dumbledore and a few other things, but he kind of like threw me for a loop seeing this guy acting so different.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all those actors because, like I said, they're all familiar faces, but I just didn't realize where they all came from or whatever. I knew I'd seen it from somewhere else. But yeah, this movie has a stellar cast. I mean, they did a good job picking them out, and they work well together. It seemed like, and who would have thought that Christopher Walken would make a good Headless Horseman? That probably wouldn't be my first pick for an actor to play that part, but Christopher Walken pulled it off really well. Good call by Tim Burton. So that's gonna do it for us for episode 14, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll give you a chance to let people know how they can get a hold of you.
All right, yeah, guys. Obviously, I'm Hunter Amino. Just go ahead and look me up on it's just Rainstorm. It's all one word. Rain is spelled R-A-I-Y-N, Storm, and then 01 at the end of that. You get a hold of me on there. You can actually see my makeup that I did for Halloween. I'm actually getting ready to do another makeup here in about a week or so. I ordered some makeup from Krylon. For those who don't know what Krylon is, they're a makeup company. If anybody's seen the show Face Off on Sci-Fi, they're the biggest sponsor of that. They've got a lot of really awesome prosthetic pieces you can create. You can even order like bulk makeup for that kind of stuff. Just be looking out for some of that. I have an excerpt from my story that I pieced together. And if it's okay, I could read it one day for the show. Hopefully everyone will like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Anytime you want to read that, you're more than welcome to. Stay tuned for our next episode coming up in 2 weeks. And remember to take a closer look at the world around you, and you may just find it as stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat Shadow.